So I was reading in Genesis in the fall,
Hmm.
and it really jumped out at me that when God is rebuking the serpent,
Hmm.
or is that the right word?
Yeah.
Cursing the serpent, that
Yeah.
it said that there'll be that he's going to put enmity between his seed and her seed, and I never really thought about
Hmm.
the serpent multiplying basically that way, or if and it just made me
What does it mean, actually?
yeah, is the enemy's family constantly growing, and I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that, or maybe I don't know if I'm posing a real question there.
No, that's okay.
How about just what does it mean?
Yeah, in a sense, he does. And John really picks up that idea best, I think, where he sees a dichotomy in the universe, where there's the what we call the cosmos system and the kingdom system, where you've got all that proceeds from God. So if you go to say, see, First John chapter 5. He really works out the doctrine of the cosmos in First John, but he says, First John 5:4, for whatever is born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Now, multiple times in the book of First John, he talks about whoever believes is born of God, whoever, etc., etc. When he's coming to his climax towards the end of the book, he says not only whoever, not only all the people, but whatever is born of God overcomes the world. Now, to be a person who's born of God, you have to believe, but to be a thing that's born of God, you come from him, your source is in him. So whatever has its source in God overcomes the world. Back in chapter 2, verse 19. Yeah, 1 John 2:19, talking about some false teachers who departed from the apostles. So they were probably working with the apostles at some point, but their message deviated from the apostles' message. And it says they went out from us, they departed from us, but they were not really of us. And this
Oh, right.
a different kind of this is actually, it's not just a genitive, but it's the preposition ek, which means out of or having its source in. So they were not really of us. They didn't have their source in the same place as them. For if they had been of us, they would have remained with us, but they went out so that it would be shown that they are not really of us. And John continues to develop this idea of, like, there's black and white. There's those who are born of the cosmos system, those who are born of God. So if you see other places, and where he probably got this dichotomy from is the same words he recorded Christ speaking. For example, in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 44, he says, you are of your father, the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies. So there's a lot of doctrines that kind of weave in there, especially when you're in somewhere like the fall, where Genesis 1 through 11 essentially sets down the framework of doctrine for the entire Bible. So there's we can go to Genesis chapter 5 and verse 1, and it says, this is the book of the generations of Adam in the day when God created man. He made him in the likeness of God. What God produces shares the character of God. Adam was a son of God because he was a direct creation from God. Being a direct creation from God, he shares the good character, good nature, good characteristics of God. Those were corrupted by the influence of the serpent. So we see what comes from God shares in the nature of God. Moving down to verse 3, chapter 5, verse 3, when Adam had lived 130 years, he became the father of a son in his own likeness, according to his image, and named him Seth. So God created Adam in God's image. Adam's son naturally comes in his own image. This is, I love this. It's hinted at. Genesis chapter 1, verse 11. And this is kind of a foundation text for the or what we call the seed doctrine, where we get to the promise of the seed of the Messiah as well. But Genesis chapter 1, verse 11, God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit after other kind, with seed in them." And it was so. So whatever comes from a seed produces the same kind of thing. When we're going through Genesis chapter 1, it seems like unnecessary text. Like, honestly, Moses doesn't waste much paper. Why is he going to tell us that a pear tree is going to produce pears? Like, that seems kind of obvious, except that the first mention of seed is in Genesis chapter 1. And then in Genesis chapter 3, he uses this term seed again, because it's one of the most important doctrines. The seed is actually the content of faith for most of the Old Testament. They are putting their faith in the seed of the woman that would be given to them by God in order to have salvation. So the seed, or the doctrine of the seed, is important. Whatever is from that seed shares in the nature of what produced that seed. When you get into other things like some of the parables, he'll pick up on seed doctrine as well, to teach that the gospel, or the fruit of a teacher is the message he preaches. This fruit is a seed that then is picked up by fertile soil, and it grows into more fruit, producing more gospel, sharing it to other people. So this sharing in like nature comes by believing. Those who have put themselves against the kingdom system and aligned with the world system, the cosmos system, those would be the seed of the serpent. And everyone who has put their faith in Jesus Christ, this is the seed of Christ. I think it's, where is it? In Romans chapter 5, maybe, where he says that Adam was a living soul and Jesus became a life-giving spirit. So that we have our natural life through Adam because we're of his seed. We have our spiritual life in Christ because we're of his spiritual seed. We share in his nature now. So I guess that's a really, really long way of answering your question. What's the seed of the serpent? The serpent isn't reproducing any more than Jesus Christ is reproducing physically.
Okay.
But he is reduplicating his own nature in mankind. And that's really the issue, because God gave dominion to mankind over this earth. And Satan didn't take that away from mankind and become the new king apart from man. Satan rules the earth because he rules the rulers of this earth, because they have willingly subjected themselves to him. And so the reign of Christ, and why it can't just be Jesus Christ reigning and ruling on the world that's totally void of any people, is because it was given to mankind, and natural mankind at that. It would be looked at as cheating if God just incarnates himself and makes himself the perfect king and never redeems any people. Jesus became a man so that he could be the ruler over all creation, fulfilling God's purpose. But natural man needs to be part of that. In the fall, when Satan became the god of this world, he did so by stealing the hearts of man, not by kicking them out of the garden and taking the throne.